That now moves us into our open session, which is everybody's opportunity to speak about anything they want that's not related to those last two public hearings. And while we might have been commenting about campaigning in the chambers, this is open session, this is free speech. You can say whatever you want for 3 minutes, and you will be reminded at 2 minutes and 30 seconds when you're approaching that 3-minute mark. So, and you don't have to be signed up, just line up and take turns. And
Jim Peterson, P-E-T-E-R-S-O-N. First, I want to thank the council for having Lehigh Low-Income Housing Institute up today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation because everything HomesNOW has done, all our plans is based directly off what they do. Our rules are based off what they do. We've sent, I think, all of you our packet of what we do. So if you look at what Lehigh does, that's what we want to do. One thing I do, I know you're going to vote on an ordinance tonight. And in section C, paragraph 4, it talks about fences. And we have no problem with fences. As a matter of fact, HomesNOW demands fences. If we build it on our own, if it wasn't in there, we'd put fences. We do have a problem with the site obstruction fences as a safety issue because the police can't drive by and see what's going on in there. The neighbors can't see what's going on in there. I can't drive by and see what's going on in there. And the homeless will feel like they're in a concentration camp. So I'd like to see that amended before it's voted on tonight. Besides that, I think you're all doing a great job. And maybe we get this passed tonight, and maybe next council meeting we get land. And if we get land, in 30 days we can have our tiny home village up. And if we got land to do both tiny home and tent encampment, in 2 weeks we can have the tent encampment up. By the ordinance that's wrote, we can follow it by the letter. So thank you for your work.
Thanks, Jim.
Hello, Lisa Papp, P-A-P-P, Bellingham. I'm speaking about the emergency and interim tent encampment ordinance that you folks are voting on tonight. I feel that it's kind of a cruel irony when some of us are doing very well financially, some companies are thriving, some parts of the economy are thriving, property taxes go up, housing prices go up, rents are out of line for most people. And the more that happens, the lower income people and the homeless people are struggling. Tent cities are not ideal. I'm sure all of us would agree that having people housed is preferable. But if the only dwelling that someone has is a tent, then a safe, secure, approved place for them to live is necessary. The sweeps and cleanups of camps, as you know, we well know, are expensive for the city, the county, taxpayers, and it's inhumane. So I really thank the council for their support of HomesNOW. I've been fortunate to volunteer with them, and I hope you vote to approve the interim and emergency encampment ordinance. And also, ongoing, I hope you will continue to help HomesNOW in finding some affordable land or finding ways to eliminate permit costs and other things. Because I think the tiny homes idea is a great idea, and creating that sense of community is really important, even within the homeless community. There are neighbors too. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Amy Glasser, Bellingham, Washington. I want to start by thanking the county for taking up this issue. We've been obviously working for over a year now on trying to help people who are not in shelters at all and are living on the street. And I think this is the first step in making an ordinance that could actually help us to build. I think I'd like to add that as the committees continue on homelessness that are joint with the city and all other organizations, the continued discussion about a 200-bed shelter, I think needs to be revisited, and I'm begging you to listen to professionals in the community who say that 200 beds of anything. I wouldn't want 200 beds of anybody living right next to me. And if you put people who have issues, problems, and their problems can be as simple as they lost their job and they're homeless today. It doesn't need to be mental health. It doesn't need to be anything. Anyone who is homeless is struggling. You put 200 people together and you have a recipe for post-traumatic stress flares, triggering each other's issues. It's just a bad, bad idea. The mission can't do everything. They do things great. They do things not so good. And then if you went to City Hall last night, you would hear from business owners that they do some things terribly. We ask you and beg you to continue to let HomesNOW build our shower units in less than 6 weeks. We made that done. The housing that Jim is talking about can be done in no time at all. We can get at least 10, 20 people off the street by winter. We've already provided at least 47 showers to people. We've put in people, I believe, about 30 people in homes, whether it be getting them with family or housing or other shelter. We can do it. We're just asking for the ordinance, some land, and some support when it comes to hookups. We're behind the curve in Bellingham. We're way behind the curve. Everyone else has tent cities and tiny home projects, and they've got thousands and thousands of homeless. We only have about 1,000. We can fix this problem and then deal with people one by one to keep them in a home where we can fix the problem. Just look at other countries. They're all doing it, and they're not doing it with mega shelters. Thank you.
Hi, Doug Gustafson, Technical Director of HomesNOW. I wanted to talk about 3 things on the ordinance surrounding temporary encampments and tiny homes. I noticed that under Section 5 of the ordinance, it says that there's a hard cap on, it doesn't say a hard cap, but there is a hard cap on 1 90-day extension for any temporary encampment with structures or tents. I suggested an amendment to allow for a longer time period for structures such as tiny homes, perhaps 1 or 2 years. And with tents, 90 days is no problem, but just being able to extend it more than one time, because that's written in the ordinance that it can only be one time. So somebody can come to you guys later and say, hey, that it says in the ordinance only one time, you need to follow your own law. So allowing greater flexibility for you to be able to change things later as the circumstances permit makes sense to me. You might, for example, you might have a really great group of people that the neighbors love, that's not being, that the land's not being used for anything else, everyone's happy, yet it says only 1 90-day extension, so you would have to tell them to leave even though everyone around them is fine. So that's a theoretical thing that could pop up. Also, number 2, it was mentioned in a previous council meeting that providing tiny homes does not house people in great enough numbers to make a difference. The other thing to consider is that when somebody moves into a tiny home, they don't live there forever. So in essence, any tiny home community is a renewable resource. People move in, they get back on their feet, and they move on to their own place. This helps to provide a vehicle to get people out of homelessness. Once it has helped one person, it can help another person. The more that you build, the more this scales up as a vehicle to help people get off the streets. HomesNOW has proven that we can build tiny homes with community involvement, 0 taxpayer dollars, that we can also manage a temporary tent encampment, as we did on City Hall for 18 days, and that we can provide services such as showers without violating any health, safety, or environmental laws or rules. In fact, our efforts have made the City of Bellingham and Whatcom more healthy, safe, and a clean place, which adds value to the overall community. Of course, we've only been able to do this on a smaller scale because of the restrictions in the law, but we hope that you can do what you can to help us solve this vital issue with no taxpayer dollars.
30 seconds.
And with no risk to the county. We invite anybody to take a look at our work, whether it's to see the tiny homes on Lemmy or to check out the shower truck or any of the monthly homeless summits. I'd like to thank council members Barbara Brenner, Tyler Bird, Sat Paul Sidhu, Barry Buchanan for getting directly involved. I'd also like to thank Planning Director Mark Personius for coming out to Lemmy to take a look at the homes we built so far. I hope we can find some land and make this happen, hopefully before winter when it's going to be needed most. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Mike?
My name is Misty O'Loughlin, Oloughglin. I am here to talk about the ordinance for the emergency tent encampments. I am a volunteer with HomesNOW and a longtime volunteer and advocate for the homeless here in Whatcom County. My research in Seattle and other encampments, Cincinnati, all over this country have shown that the encampments save money for the county, for the state, on the sweeps that they're doing. there shouldn't even be sweeps without an alternative place for people to go. The mission can take some people, but they also break up families and don't have places for women and children. The Agape Home has them. You can't go to the mission if you have a job at night because you have to be there just during sleeping hours. It saves money on prosecuting people for doing things like camping or sitting on the sidewalks, things that people shouldn't be in trouble for if they have no other place to go. It allows them to keep their possessions, to keep independence, to keep autonomy, and gives them some dignity and allows them to maintain themselves hygiene-wise and sanitation. People aren't going to choose to throw their garbage everywhere if they have a place to put it. They're not going to choose to use the restroom outdoors if they have restrooms available to them. People are doing these things out of desperation, and we would like to help with that. The tent encampments also concentrate the population so that they can better connect with services, so that outreach teams can reach them easier and know where they're going to find them, so that they can get on housing lists, so that they can be able to access the resources to get them into housing. The
30
housing,
seconds.
the housing lists are long, but it's a start. It's better than nothing. We're not asking for money. We're just asking for space. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hillary Cole, and I live in Bellingham. I hope you had a chance to walk through that shower truck outside. It's fantastic. Okay, and there's some other things you may not know about. They have a community garden. This past monthly summit, homeless people were fed a healthy salad made from the lettuce and other vegetables grown in this garden. HomesNOW needs land and an ordinance that lets them build tiny homes and encampments. We need areas where vehicles can park safely with services like water and toilets. You, the county council, have the opportunity right now to put Whatcom County on the map, to achieve what other areas are doing around the nation to help the houseless. With county land, HomesNOW's Jim Peterson says that he can move services in place and have an urban rest stop, if you will, ready and running in as short as 2 weeks. And as you know, looking at the shower truck, he keeps his word. HomesNOW has proven over and over again they deliver and are worthy of your trust. Lastly, now is the time to do this. Have these areas designated by an ordinance in place before the fall and the bitter cold and wet winter comes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jessica Radovich, Radovich, Bellingham. I'm a counselor, a mental health counselor, and I've worked with people experiencing homelessness and marginalized communities, and also specifically do work in supporting people in healing trauma. And I'm also an artist who works in social justice projects, and just want to speak to my experience and in relation to the temporary encampment ordinance. I just returned from Philadelphia. I was there for a month working directly with people living on the street in self-created encampments. I was sent there to work on a project looking at this intersection of homelessness and the opiate crisis, which in Philadelphia has become a public health crisis. Philadelphia has a large homelessness issue, and one of the things that we know is that homelessness often intersects with high levels of trauma and poverty, and also intersects with high levels of addiction too, and the two are related. They're related. And in Philadelphia specifically, I was sent there because Philly has right now the largest open-air heroin market on the eastern seaboard. So it was really a strange sight to behold. but people living in huge encampments on the street, self-created, not supported by the government or the city. So I spent the month there and learned a lot and was in direct contact with people living on the street. And right before I left, it found out that the city was going to do a sweep. And so it was the second sweep that they had done. The first one, people were living in a truly abandoned train yard, and they did a sweep and fenced it off. And this was going to be the second one. The city was offered counsel to try to build more relationship with the people living on the street, to poll the homeless population on their own needs, to explore alternative housing, and to mobilize high levels of basic needs services. The shower truck is actually unbelievable. Philly doesn't have that, which is shocking to me. So I'm really proud that it's in Bellingham. It's truly a basic need that people will speak about. Instead, they chose to do a sweep, and it was the recycling of the same approach, which leads to the same outcome. And what we thought we would see was exactly what we saw. I watched the sweep from the internet for people who were streaming it for me, and people on the street were humiliated.
30 seconds.
They were traumatized and scattered. They had nowhere to go. Shelters are not preferred by everyone who's homeless. And there's community inside of true community, relationships and values. One of the things we know about trauma is that relationship is vital to healing it, not just as a platitude, but it actually rebuilds the brain structures that get severed in trauma. And so I just want to speak in support of groups like HomesNOW and people who are willing to be in deep relationship with the homeless, because it truly does heal trauma at its origins. Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Craig Kasberg. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tidal Vision. In the last 5 to 6 weeks, I've gotten to know everyone behind the HomesNOW movement, and I can personally attest that not only were they professional, resourceful, and respectful, even leaving our premises better than we gave it to them when we lent our extra warehouse to them to build the shower truck. But most importantly, I've been just really inspired by all of them. They're doers who really believe to the bottom of their hearts that together as a community, we can end the needless and unnecessary suffering of our neighbors. And with the help of your vote tonight, that'll be one step in that direction. One thing I've learned through business and just my personal life is that sometimes the most impactful solutions are also the most simplest. Another thing I've observed is that change gets done by people who passionately believe in the end cause. And because of that, because there will always be unexpected hurdles along the way. And I think one thing we could all agree on is that these guys' heart is in their cause, and they're going to see it through no matter what hurdles and modifications need to be done along the way. Not only do these guys believe that by providing the basic needs for survival that we can create a better community and a better world for that matter, but also a community with less crime that spends less of taxpayer money cleaning up and handling these things how they are handled currently. They also believe that their model
30 seconds.
creates a pathway for people on the lower end of the economic ladder to rise out of it. And I believe they've demonstrated that through their first 2 tiny homes. I was really impressed to learn they've already moved 8 people out of homelessness, 6 of them who are already supporting themselves in their own apartments and paying for that on their own. I think this movement is going to be compounding as growth typically is. Thank you.
Hi, Marcus D. Stidham, S-T-I-D-H-A-M, Whatcom County resident. Thank you all for all of your efforts. I do really feel, again, well represented by you. I'm here to really speak to community, that this HomesNOW is a community, a community-based grassroots effort from people who I have known for decades, some of these people, as some of the biggest doers in Whatcom County. And so when I saw it, I was like, what are they doing? I'm like, I want to be part of that. And man, did I ever want to be part of that. And man, do I feel swept up in that. And I hope you all will be in that with us. The shower truck is fabulous. I mean, it's not just a slogan. It just comes out when I say these people come out smiling, full of hope, and smelling like soap. So, you know, if you've had any doubts, if any of you have had any doubts about our ability to bring it to completion, fruition, our passion, you know, please put that aside. This is a community partnership, and we're asking to be the ones to help the community get started, to be the pilot program. Let us take the shot. We'll do it because we want to help right now. I have learned so much about compassion. I thought I knew about compassion until I met Jim Peterson, Amy Glasser, and I'm not even going to say all the other names. It's humbling. It's humbling. Come be humbled with us. Come clean a shower stall one day with us, you know, and do that with us too. It's so rewarding. And just please, please, please help us get some land and make this ordinance work for all of us. And we're all going to be really proud of this later. Thanks.
Bird with an eye.
Good evening. My name is Tony Bird. I live in Bellingham. And I believe I'm allowed to say that I'm running for Congress in Washington's 2nd Congressional District as a Green Party member. But that's not what I'm really here to talk about. I want to speak in support of the temporary emergency ordinance that's proposed. I hope you pass it. I also want to mention, to sort of draw back from that ordinance and talk about the fact that the need for an ordinance at all is not temporary, it's not new, and it's going to be around for a while, probably years. We have structural problems in the economy. Wages haven't gone up in 40 years, basically, for most people. 40 years. In the meantime, the prices of the things they have to buy are skyrocketing. The number of jobs that are available increasingly is not as great as the number of people seeking jobs, and the jobs that are available are minimum wage jobs. So the structure of the economy is failing us. It is failing us, all of us. And other cities, other communities, take it on themselves to temper the effects of the economy in disrupting people's lives and breaking up families and ruining people's lives. I don't know if you saw the wonderful exhibit that was on Prospect Street for about a month earlier this year about the city of Vienna, Austria, which is rated the most livable city in the world, and where every person has a decent place to live. And the way they do that, they've been at it for 100 years, is for the city and for nonprofits to own most of the housing. The city and the nonprofits own most of the housing. And the result is everybody is housed. There's more to say, but there probably isn't time to say it tonight. But I want to emphasize the structural problem.
Fine.
And the need for long-term thinking about all these questions, as well as this interim temporary ordinance.
Okay. And if there's anybody else who would like to make comments, come on down. Still open.
My name's Jennifer Mansfield, Mansfield, and I'm a Whatcom County resident. I'm going to kind of go off of what Stoney was saying here. Recently, I read an article by a professor of medicine, University of California, and she writes, "Why are so many unsheltered homeless people on the West Coast? Homelessness is visible and a result of a higher proportion of people who are unsheltered." She asks, why is this occurring on the West Coast? The main reason? Lack of affordable housing. People living without shelter experience the following: humiliation, isolation, and terror because they don't have privacy or safety. No way to relieve themselves or maintain hygiene because they don't have toilets or showers. No way to prepare or store food and or belongings because they don't have any place to store them. No space to sleep or keep safe. No beds. Exposure to perpetrators of crime, physical and sexual abuse. Exposure to high-risk behaviors for survival, drugs and prostitution. Exposure to and exacerbation of communicable disease. Again, no hygiene facilities. Disruption with family, friends, and service providers because they're constantly having to be relocated for survival. Lack of shelter becomes a form of societal displacement in which a person struggles to find a legal and safe alternative for occupying their living, breathing space. Often people experience exploitation of their situation in the form of social prejudice and criminal punishment. Basic needs and requirements for survival in a society that uses capitalism as a means of monetary exchange places a burden on a person to sustain a modicum income to achieve security. When this income cannot be sustained out of lack and or loss, it compromises a person's ability and financial security, and basic needs become difficult to meet. So the question is, do we consider housing to be a basic need, and do we consider this to be a government priority? It's not just a capitalist society, but a society whose government foundation is a democracy and a republic of the people, for which we maintain our institutions and systems of management to reflect the needs of the people to reach optimum conditions of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Are we the people acting as policymakers and enforcers which deprive or punish people who are experiencing hardship? Are we abiding by principles that protect our constitutional rights? The article continues to state that the West Coast suffers from rising costs of rental housing, stagnant incomes for low-wage workers, and a decline in federal support for affordable housing. So we're dealing with rent costs, low wages, and federal housing funds being cut.
30 seconds.
So I'm here to advocate for what we are considering navigation centers to help and assist people in the form of encampments, temporary encampments, tiny homes, urban rest stops, and permanent solutions for people to transition to permanent housing. I'll cut it short there. It was a little bit more, but that's okay. Thank you.
Switch off here. Okay.
Hi, I'm Lynn Allen, and I live in Bellingham. Well, when I volunteered to help with HomesNOW, I didn't know how close I was to homelessness. But I'm finding out. As my rent was put up $375, I can't afford that. And the transition has been really difficult. And my health has definitely deteriorated. And I'm selling almost all of my possessions. And I'm getting amazing support from the volunteers at HomesNOW, of course. And that's really helping to see me through. And I just want to encourage you all to notice that HomesNOW is really inspiring people to come and, give of themselves, and organizations too. And it's a model for community spirit. And so I'm supporting HomesNOW. Thank you.
John Campbell. Just want to thank the Sikh community for coming down to Maritime Heritage Park on Sunday and providing their wonderful meal for our neighbors without homes. Those guys rock. They're doers. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
I might run for county council. My name is Joanne Pattern, Pattern. First, thank you all for listening to us, and for most of you for helping us with everything that you do. I was here a few months back, and we cheered you all on for doing so much more than down the hill. I think we all know what we're talking about, because you know what else runs downhill. And they don't seem to respond except in a really negative way to our requests. And we would like to say, please follow through with what you said a few months ago, that you would help us out and help us, please. We're asking. We don't ask for money to the extreme that we don't take money, 94 cents out of the dollar? Is that what it is, Jim? Thank you very much. We don't he doesn't put money in his pocket. None of us do. And the majority of the people that volunteer for HomesNOW work jobs, and after they work jobs, they go and volunteer. They barely feed their families. They don't take time with their families. They volunteer all their free time. They have Social Security, and they volunteer all. They give any money they have to HomesNOW. Everything is given out of the goodness of their hearts, all their time, everything. So this isn't like people have. It's everything they give to HomesNOW. So this is a true out of the goodness of their hearts. And we don't have anything else except what we can ask you for. And businesses are coming out of the woodwork to give. So we're asking you, please, we just need some land. We need some help. And you're the ones. We really are asking, please, support HomesNOW. They're awesome. And look out across the street, you see. It's awesome. Okay, please, thank you. After your jobs.
I hope you do go next year. Aaron Thomas, Ferndale. I wanted to echo most everybody that's talked here about the HomesNOW, not later, in the fabulous work that you guys have done. Thank you so much for doing that. You know, I come from a grassroots part of helping our homeless out at Lummi, and you know, it's thankless. It really is thankless work. But you know, at the very end, the reward is seeing what the shower truck that we have out there that you guys have created. Today, I saw one of our tribal members that was homeless. The very first tent that we knocked on, he graduated from, got his high school diploma today. And you know, it's those kinds of things that are rewarding when you start doing this work. So I just want to raise my hands out to HomesNOW, not later, and the Whatcom County Council, and some of you that have come out to Lummi and seen our tiny homes and the 2 shelters. I just raise my hands out to you as well. I wanted to speak real briefly on another issue. It's coming up really quickly. We've been having some issues with the non-Indian homeowners out on Hermosa Beach on Lummi Shore Road, just right by the tiny homes that you guys went out and seen. And what's happening is for decades, we've had this issue where non-Indians that live there, they've been living there forever, are claiming that that's their beach. And so our Lummi tribal members are going there to, you know, gather their resources there, you know, their clam dig or whatever, and they're told to get off the beach. And the issue that's happening is that the property maps that they have are incorrect. And according to my sources, that those property maps were done back in the 90s, and the county is the one that helped create those property maps, and they can show you that this is my beach. Look, it says right here, shows it right there. But the Treaty of 1855 and all the other documents after that prove that that's when the tide is out. That's our land. That's our reset. The table is set. So I really urge the county to look into this. I don't want to start a riot between 2 different groups of people, although we've been out there rallying too. So some of my family members and tribal members, we want to let them know in a peaceful way that this is our beach, that's the resources that our ancestors fought for, and why we have the Treaty of 1855.
30 seconds.
So, again, I urge you guys to look into it. 4th of July is coming up really quickly, and that's usually when it gets really heated, is on the 4th of July, because everybody wants that prime spot. So, HCM, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing nobody else coming down for open session, I'm going to close the open session, and I will point out that a lot of the comments having to do with the emergency ordinance, we have that on our agenda after we potentially burn through a lot of consent items here fairly quickly. So, Ms. Brenner?
I move we go directly to that ordinance.
Second.
I was setting you up for that. Thank you. Because we got a really exciting consent agenda coming out of the Finance and Administrative Services Committee. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move what is item 9 on other items to ahead of the consent agenda. And the clerk's okay with that? Okay. Mr. Berg?
Shouldn't we bump the interim up as well then? Do them at the same time? It's number 2. Oh, it's just introduction? Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Right now I
We have
think,
to do one first. and-
Yep.
Yeah,
so we're okay with
but we could do that.
moving the emergency ordinance to adopt zoning regulations for the siting, establishment, and operation of temporary tent encampments to ahead of the consent agenda. That's the motion. We have a second. Ms. Brenner?
Discussion. I move that we change the,
Let's move it first, then we can start
oh,
doing
I
that.
thought, okay.
Got to move
right.
the agenda item.
I'm ahead of myself, sorry.
All right, you are. All right. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Brown excused. So we are now effectively in our agenda on our packet, page 7, moving to item 9, the ordinance emergency adopting emergency zoning regulations for the siting, establishment, and operation of temporary tent encampments. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion.
Second?
Mr. Byrd seconds. Any discussion?
I'm going to let him make them.
Mr. Byrd?
amendments.
Ms. Franks, did you have, we had talked about there were some other edits, or possibly, were those as it pertains to,
Yeah, it's in the office, it's back in the office.
I didn't know if there was another copy somewhere I'm missing, because I know I have the
want me to go
the
get it?
document from.
I can go
Sure,
get
no,
it.
but-
That was my only
Oh, I'll
copy that
go
I
get it.
gave you
Oh,
of
okay.
just section O, but I know there were some other minor changes that the sheriff had recommended, and I think Mr. Personius has those if you don't have those. Do you have the language I proposed to section O?
Ms. Brenner's grabbing
Okay.
it.
Yes, we do.
That, Karen, Ms. Frakes, is that this, the orange?
Did it go out in
Yes.
that?
Sheriff's copy.
Yeah, that is the sheriff's
and then-
language.
Oh, that's the sheriff's recommended changes, and then I further changed section O.
I see changes in section O in,
He had changed it, and I changed it a little bit differently. There it is.
All right, so in order to do this, do we need to then make motions to include the sheriff's copy or edits into the ones we're looking at?
Yeah, definitely, and also to use the amendments that I propose.
So can we do it just one at a time, I suppose? It would be simple.
we
So-
have no motion on the floor right now except the main.
motion to
The main
go for
motion,
So
the,
I would move to edit section C to remove the site obscuring from the description so that it reads a 6-foot tall fence is required around the perimeter.
I think you mean section 4C.
Yes.
Yeah, 4C.
So we have a motion, Mr. Sadoo?
I second that, but I have a suggestion.
Okay.
That my suggestion is that we should not have a 6-foot fence, but a 3-foot fence. Having a fence has its own advantage, is that it demarcates the body as well as the neighbors, or there will be, like, once it is there, and even the residents have a boundary that this is there. That 3-foot fence is that person driving by, person walking by can see it, and people from in there can also see it. So that's my suggestion. that removing the fence opens the boundaries. People come at night, they may just camp there, especially in summers, and then you have an issue with the neighbors or something. It will actually keep the area demarcated, and everybody knows this is where they're supposed to be, this is where they're not supposed to be. But it does not obscure the vision for the people on the both sides of the fence, or health department, any police department, anybody going by.
So procedurally, Mr. City, we have section 4C, the motion was to remove section 4C about fences. You're proposing.
No, just the site obscuring.
Remove
the word site obscuring.
Removing the word site.
Site obscuring.
Okay. And you're proposing an amendment to change from 6, I just want to make specific what your proposal is.
I'm proposing just change the word from 6 foot to 3 foot and take the words site obscuring out.
That has to be a separate motion unless he takes it as a friendly amendment.
Yeah, or I mean,
Mr.
if you're
Byrd?
willing to take that as an amendment.
No.
I'm guessing that our housing advocates are not, or are opposed.
We're gonna hold off on
Yeah.
having public
Yeah,
comments on
yeah,
this.
yeah, that's fine. I mean,
Okay.
It's hard enough for us to
So,
sort
no.
ourselves.
oh, that's fine.
Thank you.
It's fine with me. I'm just making a suggestion. In my mind, I think
Okay.
it does create
Let's
that
vote on it.
boundary.
So Mr. Byrd is not accepting that? Okay, so the motion then is to make sure we got this on section 4C, simply remove the words site obscuring?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? None? That passes 6-0 with Mr. Brown excused. Okay. Mr. Byrd?
I do have a question before I move on to my next kind of change. As far as this, Mr. Personas, I'm curious, the way section 3, number C is written, I read it as if it is a nonprofit and a religious organization are required. Is this, oh no, okay, I missed the or, so I apologize, never mind, I see that at the end. Earlier today, though, Ms. Lee mentioned that they're able to do it on for-profit land, and that there's actually state or tax incentives to a for-profit property owner allowing it on his property without a nonprofit. Can we do that as well?
So we had talked to council right in the past about kind of following the city's lead on this and their process. That process is to first take advantage of the state RCW that allows the religious organizations to operate those facilities. That's what this ordinance would just, that's the RCW, the state umbrella that it would come under. And in here, also in this ordinance, is a statement that we would then pursue permanent regulations to allow these temporary facilities outside of that RCW, so on private lands that, right, so that's a separate process.
Okay, got it. So the suggestion is that we move forward with the nonprofit and the religious organizations, and then in the more permanent version that will open it up to private landowners.
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right, thank you. So I would move that in section 5, we change the encampments may be approved for a period not to exceed 90 days, and the director may grant one 90-day extension to read, the encampments may be approved for a period of 1 year, and the director may grant a 1-year extension, or extensions of 1 year.
Do we have a second
I
for that?
second that.
Ms. Brenner?
Okay. I think there's a simpler way to say it. That's for tent encampments.
This would be for tiny houses.
For tiny, yeah, for other structures, it would be for 2 years with the possibility of extensions. I wouldn't put a limit on how many extensions. That should be depending on how they, you know.
Point of clarification, we're using the phrase tent encampments as a generic catch-all for tiny houses, whether they're
No,
wooden or
it's
tent,
not.
or is this a specific?
There's other structures, it says.
Yes, as defined and as written, it states, temporary tent encampment means a short-term residence facility for a group of people that is composed of tents or other temporary structures as approved by the director. So that would be the tiny tiny homes or tiny villages, other structure, other temporary structures. So it
So
could
we're
be
talking-
tents or tiny homes.
That's what I'm trying to, from Ms. Brenner's point. So when we're talking about section 5, when it's talking about temporary tent encampments, that is collectively talking about.
Correct, it makes no distinction. If council wants to make a distinction, that's language you would have to develop carefully and then separate if you wanted 90 days on tents and a different time period on tiny home villages that were non-tents, that would be separate language you'd have to develop.
90 days for tents and up to 2 years for other structures with the ability to have extensions.
Okay, I got a motion for 1 year on the generic phrase tent encampments that's collectively referring to tents and other structures. And now I've got another motion. So where are we at in motions? That's
That
a
was
fir-
very friendly.
So I'm not opposed to that. I'm just wondering if with the emergency, if we keep it to 1 year plus, it's essentially an unlimited number of 1 year extensions until we
Why
get.
don't we just say extensions instead of 1 year extensions? If they're doing fine, and
How would we phrase that?
okay, it would be for up to 2 years with the ability to have extensions. I wouldn't put
Okay,
any-
so up to 2 years with annual extensions?
With,
Ms.
with
Franks, do you wanna
extensions.
add
Don't,
something
I
here?
wouldn't put a number.
Okay, this is a 6-month emergency moratorium.
I know.
Good point. I just
60
want
days,
to,
okay.
just want to weigh in, council, just to remind you, this is an emergency ordinance. If you want to adopt it tonight, it becomes effective immediately. SEPA exempt. It's good for 6 months, but you must hold a public hearing within
60
60 days. You've got to hold a public hearing.
Right.
Remember, the idea is that we're going to later tonight introduce the interim ordinance, which presumably would be the same as you passed tonight and now as the emergency. But we have to perform SEPA on the interim, and then we have to come back with that, hold a public hearing, and then you can adopt that. So one idea would be for you, if you wanted to do the emergency as is tonight, give us some direction on some of these issues that might require a little bit of legal analysis or a little bit of word crafting, and we can come back with that with the interim ordinance. That would give you
I understand.
a good option.
Ms. Brenner.
What?
I'm concerned.
Ms. Brenner's hand was doing this.
I was waving in his face.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think the closer we have it to what we want tonight, the less work for you guys.
Well, it isn't, because you're making decisions on the fly that we don't really have a chance to review. And so I think it would make sense to adopt it as it is tonight, and we have an opportunity to look at good changes before we adopt something more permanent than this.
I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is, by state and federal law, it's allowed. We had the person give that presentation today, and it is certainly allowed in the state of Washington. If we have ordinances that have a problem with this, we need to change those in the interim. And that's why doing it as an emergency with what we want, that's not, I don't think it's substantive. It's because it's only going to be for how many, 6 months? 60 days, whatever. But we should have our intent in here.
Mr. Berg?
So, Ms. Frakes, I'm curious if you can elaborate with me on this one, walk it through so I can understand it. Within the emergency ordinance will last 60 days, but it gives 90 days. So it obviously gives more time than what the emergency ordinance lasts.
Well,
So
We can extend
Right,
that.
what it allows is someone to come in while the emergency ordinance is in effect and apply for something, and they'll be able to do it for whatever the law is at the time they apply. And so, you know, if somebody comes in the next 2 weeks, they will basically vest to whatever you adopt tonight.
So if we went to 1 year, what would be the concern with that?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not saying there is a concern, it's just these are changes that, you know, it's hard when you just make them on the floor and we don't have a time to talk about them. I was particularly concerned about just saying, with extensions, because you definitely have to have some type of objective criteria so the administrator knows when an extension should be issued.
Ms. Brenner, and then I want to follow.
Oh, you want to go first?
Yeah, actually, I guess right now we have a motion about amending section 5 with a couple of sort of rival motions here. We have an alternative that's potentially adopt this, and then in 2 weeks, you come back to us with the interim ordinance that would have our concerns about section 5 addressed in that.
Correct.
So one path forward is to maybe dispose of these motions, pass this, which we've already amended in terms of the fence.
We have amended the fence.
But everybody, even the sheriff wanted
Yeah,
to
so,
see
and then have legal and planning come back to us with this clear, we are giving you a sense that 90 days is insufficient, I think, and that there may be some distinction between tents and how tent encampments and tiny homes are.
He's already been told about that.
If council wants to go that route, it would be good to get your intent clear. One of the other things and our concerns about just granting extensions on the fly is that we still need this, I would want the sheriffs and the health departments and to provide the human services for these facilities to have a chance to just look at that extension too. And what are there additional criteria the planning director should have in place in terms of whether or not to approve a 1-year extension or whatever the number is? Are there health concerns? Are there security concerns? Are there sheriff's concerns? Are there public safety concerns? So forth. I would want to send that back to those departments, whatever your intent is, and just get their comments on that. The other thing to consider is whether council wants to consider on extending beyond the 90 or 100 days. Does council want to have that authority to approve those extensions?
But as far as the motion, are the motioners interested in pursuing those motions or withdrawing them so we can have this discussion about directing staff to deal with section 5? Ms. Brenner.
Okay, how about 1 year and just instead of one extension, just put extensions? And that would be dependent on whatever you guys come up with.
Well, yeah, but that's, for us to include it in the ordinance tonight, it has to be what you come up with, I think.
Well, that's what I came
and
up
so
with.
it
And it wasn't tonight.
Mr. Burke.
I already knew I wanted to.
I'm curious, because you allow for one additional extension in here. What is the criteria that you're using for this? And can't we use the same
That's a good
criteria
question.
for the 1-year extension?
Was there criteria even included?
Yeah.
It seemed kind of like it was at your discretion, to be honest, but.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is, again, one thing for council to consider is would council rather have that decision-making authority rather than the director?
Being that the nearest that would occur would be 1 year from today, if they dropped houses today, we could define that criteria within the next ordinance.
Correct.
Okay. Right. So I'd like to keep my amendment that I suggested, or my motion, to 1 year with a 1-year extension, and then we can address additional changes in the future ordinances. 'Cause I think the cost of moving the facilities is high, so.
Okay, so with that is the,
Okay.
so the motion right now is, does the clerk have a sense of what the motion is?
Okay, section 5, it's about halfway down. It says, temporary tent encampments may be approved for a period not to exceed 90 days. So that would read, temporary tent encampments may be approved for a period not to exceed 1 year. The director may grant a 1-year extension, provided all conditions have been complied with and circumstances associated with the use have not changed.
Ms. Brenner.
Well, I think we should leave the sentence just the way it is and say other structures may be approved for a period not to exceed 1 year. And the director may grant one-year extension, providing all conditions have been complied with. I don't see how that can be a problem.
Okay, but as far as the motion, Mr. Byrd, you have just, no, she's talking about different.
I just separated them.
Yeah.
I separated tent encampments from other structures.
Well, I don't think this ordinance even applies to other structures.
Well, it's
It only
supposed to.
applies to, at this point, this ordinance applies to tent encampment or tents and other temporary structures.
Well, I'm saying, I'm splitting them up.
Well, temporary structures, so you want to split up like tiny homes from tents?
From tent
Oh,
encampments,
okay.
yes.
Okay, so we have, again, I want to make sure we know what the motion is. We are, you say you're splitting something. Mr. Byrd had a motion. The motion is,
I can make.
are you requesting an amendment to Mr. Byrd's motion?
Yeah, I would like it to say, where was that? Temporary tent encampments may be improved for a period not to exceed 90 days. The director may grant one 90-day extension provided all conditions have been complied with and circumstances associated to the use have not changed. Other temporary structures shall be approved for a period not to exceed 1 year. The director may grant one-year extension provided all conditions have been complied with and circumstances associated with the use have not changed. I'm just separating them.
Mr. Byrd?
I'm willing to take that, but instead of other temporary structures, let's be specific and just say
That
tiny homes.
it doesn't, you've got to be aware that the definition of temporary tent encampment is both tents and temporary structures. So when you
I'm
first.
changing it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we know what the motion is. I will speak against the motion, but I just want to know what the motion
All right,
is.
Whatever.
You would have to come up with a new definition
Right.
if we're going to separate them.
Right.
Then you've got to come up with a separate definition for temporary structures,
Right.
which we don't.
I want to get this motion moved, and I want to make sure we know, moved as voted on.
Maybe
so-
the council can deal with the tent encampment right now and then deal with other structures after this motion.
Okay.
So we separate the two
Okay.
into two different motions.
Well, but tent encampment's already there. That's already in there.
And that would be Councilmember Byrd's motion is to make those changes to tent encampments. And once we've disposed of that motion, Barbara, then maybe you can make a motion for your.
So, okay.
That's not,
Okay, we have Mr. Byrd's motion unamended.
Yeah, so I think I have a solution to this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it reads may be approved for a period not to exceed 1 year. So we can leave, if we make that change, not to exceed 1 year, and we let staff know if it is a tent encampment, that we really want it to be less than 90 days. And if it is a tiny home encampment, then we want it to be up to a year. We want it to be a year. And
that's
then-
what my motion.
So, and then we can actually work that into the next ordinance more,
Okay.
with more clarity.
How about just
Stay
adding a
here.
clause? I got it, okay.
Let's just, I guess I'm trying to,
I know how to
we have a couple options here. One is we deal with Mr. Byrd's motion, and then we proceed in terms of direction we want to give to staff. Okay, so, speaking to Mr. Byrd's motion.
Yes,
Ms. Brenner.
friendly amendment. If it said temporary tent encampments, all that, provided that tiny homes may be approved for a period not to exceed 1 year, the director may grant one-year extension provided all,
I think, but, yeah, go ahead.
So I think, just try to think of this as the first step. This is just the first step, putting your toe in the
urgency.
water on this. Second step is going to be in a couple of weeks when we bring back the interim ordinance. It's going to have that language fully fleshed out, and we're going to we'll have dual definitions. We'll define temporary structures separately from tent encampments, and we can address and treat them separately in those issues. That's would be a lot cleaner way to do it.
Okay.
Ms. Brenner, you've proposed another amendment.
But wait a minute, I have a question for Mark. I specifically asked you about this. You said on the other structures, there was no 90-day limit. Did I misunderstand you?
There's no differentiation in this ordinance between tent encampments and tiny home encampments. They are just called temporary tent encampments. It's just word language. So if you want to separate them out, we get that, let us know that, but that's something we should address in the interim ordinance. This is just a first
And I
step.
can't address it in the emergency
No,
ordinance.
you'd have to come up with a definition for temporary structures other than tents.
What if I just said tiny homes?
You have to have a definition for it. There's no definition for it in this ordinance. So what is it, you know, and I can't recommend it.
Like what you saw when you went out there?
Mr. Sadoo's been waiting to talk, but I want to make sure
Okay.
this amendment is
Yeah,
not going
I just want to talk about this. I think I hear what Mr. Personius is saying, that if you look at the Section 3 definitions, right now, as an emergency ordinance, he said that there is no distinction.
page? Where?
Page 366, Section 3A. It says that temporary tent encampment means short-term residence facility for a group of people that is composed of tents or other temporary structures. We are working on an emergency ordinance to be implemented tonight so that tomorrow morning somebody can take it, application, and apply for that. That's one part. The second part is in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we will come up with an interim ordinance. This has life of only 60 days, but we do that today.
And can I add something? If somebody did apply during the next 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and then the law was broadened
and
later,
then
we
they-
would let them
they
take
get the benefit.
advantage of the broadened law.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They get that benefit.
Right,
They're not
right,
covered by this.
right.
So what I'm saying is that in the tent, the understanding is tent 50 square feet, 100 square feet? Like we listened to Lehigh that, okay, they are under 12 by 10 or 120 square feet. Like there are a lot of questions we have to answer. And tiny home, like, okay, tiny home can be 500 square feet. Tiny home can be 2 stories high. Tiny home can be only 10 by 10. We understand that, but I think that it'll be wise for us to take that little 2-week time and define that if there is a lot, it is so many, if it is a lot is 2,500 square feet or 4,000 square feet, how many tiny homes should go in there because they're going to be in a year, right? Like there are little nuances. We need to do that rather than doing it on fly, put it in there, and then there are gaping holes in our own wording. So I favor that, that we go with the amendment suggested by Mr. Byrd and do it for tent encampments the way the definitions are, make an emergency ordinance right now so that this is out of the way, and that allows us to work on some of the definitions and differentiations and bring that back in the interim, which is actually for 6 months. And then interim can be made permanent, code changes if down the road, whatever, like everything else. That's the process.
You might have just added something to the motion beyond what Mr. Byrd had said when you used the phrase tiny homes. Or you're talking just tent?
I'm just saying there should not be no differentiation or anything
Okay.
tonight. We should
Ms. Brenner,
leave
and
the
then
way it is.
let's move this motion.
Okay, well, if we can't do something now, I want to make sure what you bring back. I don't want tiny homes to be called temporary tent encampments. I don't even want them to be temporary, because you got real good instructions. If they got to obey the rules or the laws, whatever, you had that nice long statement about that. I think it should be leased with the option of releasing as long as it's still, on page 26, whatever that was, as long as it still plays by the rules, whatever you had there.
Okay, I will speak against the motion. I share Mr. Byrd, and I think everybody's, or most people have spoken, a sense that we want a period longer than 90 days for wooden structures to be called tiny homes, but we don't have those definitions. And if we can dispense of that motion and pass this thing as is and let staff then come up with some of that language in the interim, I think that would be a cleaner way to do it. So the motion is, ready to vote on this? The motion is Mr. Byrd's original motion, changing 90 days to a year, I believe, on both of those things. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay, so we have the actual emergency ordinance with the amendment to the sign thing in section 4C. Before we go to that, I want to make sure that
There's another amendment.
there's
There's another.
there's another amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We'll
But before we
do
just,
that one
but as
first.
far as the one we just did, I think Mark, so in terms of direction to staff, you're hearing Mr. Byrd and everybody in terms of there is a need for a definition of tiny homes versus tents and differential time periods.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're all good on that. Mr. Byrd, you?
What was
go.
the count on that vote?
I'm sorry, that's a good point.
4 to 2.
It was two, it was
to
Byrd
4.
and Brenner in favor, and Sadoo, Donovan, it was 3-3 then.
Oh, it's
So-
3 to 3? Oh.
So still does not go forward then. So Baloo, Brenner, and Byrd in favor, Sadoo, Donovan, and Buchanan opposed, so it fails 3-3. Moving on.
Glad I asked. Okay,
You have to read that.
I'm trying to let me just clarify this real quick. So I think this might be simpler than what it is, but letter O.
On page 368?
368.
Yep.
Breaks? That's okay. So, am I correct that when I'm looking at this, really what I see, this current log shall be made, is the difference is that really you just have the last sentence removed, status checks through managing agency? Is that?
With the well, no, I added some other language about notifying people that law enforcement.
Yeah, it's that paragraph you gave me.
That
something else?
wasn't in there.
No?
No.
This is what you gave me.
Right.
Okay,
Right,
that's,
but the language he's talking about, I added language about advising people before they stay there
Yeah,
that they
that's what's
could
in
be
there.
subject to, law enforcement making warrant checks.
Okay.
That wasn't in the original.
right.
Was in response to some case law.
We're just letting them know that if they're going to stay there, that
The same
this
laws apply to
provision-
them as
the same
The
everybody
laws
law
apply.
can
Okay.
be provided to law enforcement upon request.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to read this in replace of O.
This is replacing all of O.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The sponsor and the managing agency shall take all reasonable and legal steps to obtain verifiable identification information to include full name and date of birth from current and prospective encampment residents and use the identification to obtain sex offender and warrant checks from appropriate agencies. The sponsor and the managing agency shall keep a log of names and dates of all people who stay overnight in the temporary tent encampment and shall advise prospective encampment residents that this log will be available upon request to law enforcement agencies.
Deleting the remaining language.
There's a little bit more.
Yep, I got it. So just double checking. So persons who have active warrants or who are required to register as a sex offender are prohibited from the encampment's location. Do you need to give this?
You better
do you
take
guys
it
want
back.
this?
Yeah.
So essentially, we're just saying, hey, if you're going to stay the night there, you're going to be under the same rules, and then we're removing the last sentence, which says status checks of current encampment residents shall be routinely performed by officers. So that's not a part of it.
That's not part
And
of
the
it,
current
no.
log provided, isn't a part of it, so.
I will say I had trouble tracking what the changes are.
You did?
Yeah.
You had?
So if you,
Okay,
if you go to the section O, and just cross out the last three lines essentially.
Okay.
So status checks of current encampments. That's the one,
That's gone.
the changes. And then the other one was,
the word, and it started right.
Why
She'd
doesn't
have to
she
read that.
read it to
Yeah,
everybody?
Karen, we may need that back.
Yeah.
Sorry. It was the same as it is
Can
in
you
here until
please
you
just
get to
read
a
it
certain
once
place,
again?
and then you
Yeah, I think
put
I'll
in,
just call out where it's
Of the
at.
sponsor.
say it on the mic. That's okay.
The first sentence is identical as is in the original
Right.
version. The second sentence, the second phrase is different. It reads, "The sponsor and managing agency shall keep a log of names and dates of all people who stay overnight in the temporary encampment." That's the same. But it's changed to say, "and shall advise prospective encampment residents that this log will be available upon request to law enforcement agencies." The next sentence is the same, and then the last sentence is deleted.
Deleted, okay.
So,
Second.
Mr. Buchanan and Councilmember Baloo, it might be more confusing if you're looking at the sheriff's version, because he has other edits that,
Yeah, no.
I'd look at the version in the.
Yeah, I was able to steer through that. But you're right, you're right.
You have a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah, I got it.
No, I second.
Oh,
Can I do
give
that?
this
Can I
to Jill.
We're ready. Let's vote.
Weren't there a couple other changes, just terminology that the sheriff had asked?
But that's
for?
not, let's do it as a separate
We're on-
motion.
Oh,
I just want to get this.
Okay, on
done.
section, so those changes have proposed by Mr. Byrd, seconded by me. Any discussion on those? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? That passes 6-0 with Mr. Brown excused. Mr. Byrd?
Right,
I just assume you got another one.
Well, what was the other that the sheriff wanted that you'd?
That's, he's working
So
on this.
I move that we replace section M with the suggested section M in the orange
Oh, yeah, okay.
document or addendum that was provided by the sheriff's office to read, so it will read, "The sponsor and the managing agency shall designate points of contact and provide contact information, 24-hour accessible phone contact to the," we're excluding Patrol Operations Commander 4, and replacing it with Chief Criminal Deputy of the Whatcom County Sheriff's or his/her designee. At least one designated point of contact shall be on duty at all times. The names of the on-duty points of contact shall be posted on-site daily, and their contact information shall be provided to the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office as described above.
Second. Concerns relate only to terminology. Anybody's got that in the orange version? That's exactly the same changes.
I read it, I don't, oh, here's my
Okay.
orange version.
That's very easy to track. Any discussion on those changes? And again, to the clerk, we're getting that off page 2 of the orange dealie, number M.
I just seconded.
Okay,
Yeah.
Didn't you second
he can second it. I second it.
it? Okay.
Any discussion on
Third.
those changes? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So that passes 6-0 with Mr. Brown excused.
I think that's everything, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that
So
was
we
it.
now have a amended version of the emergency ordinance before us. And with direction having been given on other items to staff, what are the wishes on this? Should we?
Move approval.
Move approval, yep.
Okay. All right, and this would be a roll call vote, and I lost my script because we moved around. So,
Donovan,
yes.
Satpal Sahu,
Yes.
Tim Blue,
Yes.
Barbara Brenner,
Yes.
Barry Buchanan,
Yes.
Tyler Bird,
Yes.
That passes 6-0 with Mr. Brown excused. Now for the exciting consent agenda from Finance and Administrative Services Committee. Thank you all for.
Let's take a 5-minute break. These guys deserve it.
Yeah, actually, 5 minutes to Mr.
Before, hey, you guys, before you leave, I just want to, I know this is something you've kind of looked for, but thank you, HomesNOW, for being persistent and coming up with a creative solution that has good data and has good examples behind it. I would like to attribute all of this to your organization and the work you're doing, and I appreciate that.
Got more work to do. Thanks. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
No, but
No, so we
he's
go.
not going to, he said
Oh.
5-minute break. Now I can take this
Say
off.
thank you for that. Thank you for acknowledging us, and thank you for your hard work on this. I know it's been contentious at times, but we got here. Now, can you give me some land?
That's what I say. We got more work to do. Okay.
Also, can you give me a place to park? Well, on your 5-minute break, you can run over to the shower truck and look at it if you haven't.
I think I need a shower now.
I know.
Aw, that was so neat.
Good job.
Oh,
Yeah. Worked out. Yeah.
You know, this made my